Welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Magazine Live. It is Tuesday, October 25th, and I am your host, Q, and I am joined by my co-host, P. How goes it in your neck of the woods?
Fantastically, as always. We've got an incredible guest today. I am extremely excited about the conversation we're going to have. Q, who are we talking to?
We are talking to one of my favorite Bitcoin authors out there and who should be one of your favorite Bitcoin authors. If you have not read him, that is going to be your homework assignment for the week. But we are talking to Vijay Boyapati, and he is the author of The Bullish Case for Bitcoin. And we're going to talk exactly about that. Why are we still bullish given where we are in this bear market? And then, of course, it's Taco Tuesday. So that's all we're going to give you today. And we're going to kick things off now with some news and notes. Look, I'm not trying to sit here and brag. I'm not trying to take a victory lap, but I was right. And Rishi Sunak is a full-blown CBDC shitcoiner. Not even just like a crypto bro, not like an NFT shiller, but like a pure statist CBDC. I want social credit scores and I want to control you. I want to own you. So, best of luck to our friends over in the UK. I hope this new prime minister is everything your hearts and dreams desired. I even say we miss you, Boris.
Going bold with the missing Boris part.
I was never a fan of Boris Johnson. Like I never was not my dude. But at
Liz Truss she just skates free and she's in the south of France right now, feet kicked up, getting 100.
She fucking killed it.
Yeah.
Her strategy was chef's kiss, Salt Bay, tinfoil swan goose. She knocked it out of the park.
I will say, so going back to Rishi, it's kind of dangerous though, or I guess I would expect this. He's kind of like a crypto bro. And what I mean by that is he's like, oh, like they were asking him a bunch of questions like, which cryptocurrency do you like? He's like, I like a basket of them. Like, oh, do you like this NFT or this NFT? He's like, I like this NFT. So like he makes it seem like he's cool and hip and like, I love crypto, bro. That's why I want to give you a central bank digital currency. It's Bitcoin or nothing. It's freedom or slavery. I'll let you guys decide. That's all I got.
Yeah, he's a piece of shit. On that note, we've got a classic how it started versus how it's going situation. On February 20th, 2016, CNBC reported Bitcoin has pretty much failed as a currency, Bank of England Governor Carney says. And now today, Bloomberg reports the British pound is almost as unstable as Bitcoin. Volatility of the venerable currency nears that of the crypto upstart. Basically, this is the way we all know that it's going. The world is in financial turmoil and everyone is starting to have to eat crow, though they will never do it in a clear and concise way. They'll always have justifications and reasons for why the existing currencies are totally reasonable, rational, why inflation is totally normal, but it's all bullshit. And you should have been buying Bitcoin this entire time. And if you didn't, your children are going to hate you.
I mean, look, I'm not saying we call it soccer yet, but we're coming up close to it. I'm hopeful that Rishi is just going to pass some sort of legislation that will make Brits all over the island miss Liz Truss at this point, but
we'll see.
I digress. Chris, because it can't be a day complete without us mentioning Kanye West. What did Kanye West get someone in trouble for this time?
Yeah, so another person, Anomaly is what he goes by. He's a kind of conservative personality or YouTuber. He has about 300,000 subscribers. He was demonetized. So in a tweet from himself, well, it's official. My main source of revenue has been completely demonetized this week. This will be over six figures a year wiped away if they don't give it back. He's referring to YouTube. They shut down his channel. No strike, no warnings, just full suspension. They're trying to ruin my life because I backed Kanye West. My website links to a security warning, WTF. So actually when you were, I checked it yesterday and it was removed. His website was still there without the warning. But when he was going on his website, it was linking it as a security risk by going to his website. Obviously, I do not back the anti-Semitic takes of Kanye West. But that being said, it's not illegal to be an asshole. So it's kind of conflating. I mean, people were saying back in 2020, it was kind of a slippery slope when you start deplatforming a president of the United States, and then everyone's fair game after that. So a lot of these centralized platforms, you don't own your data, the company does, and the company can do whatever they want. But with that being said, like, that's a risk that you take with running your business. And not that I agree with it or don't agree with it, but I guess my last point is a lot of these companies have been backed by taxpayer dollars, whether it's banks, whether it is a lot of these companies getting bailed out. So at what point does the Constitution protect people, because it's no longer a private entity or a private business, but it's actually just an arm of the state? And there could be an argument that every business, once they get big enough, becomes an arm of the state. So I said a lot of words there. PQ, what are your thoughts on all that?
You first, Q.
Well, you're Jewish, so if anything, I'd love your comments before I go full anti-Semitic here.
You piece of shit. It's true. It's true. I am fully 50% Ashkenazi Jewish.
Fully 50%.
Fully 100%, 50%. And the rest is just straight, mutt. But we talked about this ad infinitum. I feel like these are very dangerous precedents that have been being set for a long time. We'll say over the last 5 to 10 years, where people are being demonetized, deplatformed. I often like to say that these are private platforms. And when I say that, I don't mean that makes it okay. I mean, this is what we need to expect and plan for and use adversarial thinking to account for when we are operating in our lives. This kind of thing will continue to happen, and it's super fucked up. In the conversation you actually had with Vijay, our upcoming guest today, back in February, you guys specifically talked about how removing people's ability to maintain value is such an aggressive, violent act. And in this modern age, people can get away with it because we don't actually realize how aggressive and how effective it is to deprive people of money and of value. But that's really what's going on here. It's just as intense as if you went up to somebody and punched them in the face, potentially more so. So those are my thoughts.
So I actually disagree with that punch in the face analogy, because there is a court of law that will dictate and decide the appropriate punishment after determining all the facts in that type of a situation. Right now, what we frankly have, and I'm going to say things that are going to piss people off, but it has been deemed by people that it is unacceptable to be anti-Semitic. That is great. Hatred of any kind is unacceptable. But where are these same people when people who look like me get called terrorists on a daily basis? Where are these same people discussing the ongoing revolution in Iran, but are somehow silent about the protests in Iran and the killing of women, but are up in arms if a black man says one thing that pisses them off? I call fucking bullshit. Enough with the hypocrisy. Enough with the fucking hypocrisy.
Did you just take this from a Bitcoin and money focused conversation and turn it into a, all right, just checking.
I did.
Just checking.
To your point, the precedent is so important here. It is not whether or not he said something anti-Semitic and it offends you. It's the fact that he said something, and then that becomes the deciding factor of, well, you no longer have this right. According to who? According to who in America gets to decide that you can or can't say anything? Newsflash, nobody does. That is what the First Amendment is there to do. It is to protect your ability and right to say whatever you want. Whether I agree with what Kanye says or not is irrelevant. That is irrelevant. But now there is precedent being set that if you say something that upsets Venmo, if you say something to upset JP Morgan, if you say something to upset Adidas, CAA, Gap, where else Kanye just got dropped?
Those are the only
But
places.
Balenciaga.
But like,
Wait,
it's just,
these aren't, I mean, I did use the word precedent,
but it's not about, oh, the next famous person. No, it's about, oh, what happens when all of a sudden there is this social credit system and all of a sudden you're joking text message amongst your group of friends where you crack a racist joke here or there, which like I'm as guilty of the next person of still doing.
You heard it here first. Q is racist.
And so as a result, like what happens if, in this social credit system, it's found that I made a racist joke and hey, you can't go grocery shopping or you can't send your kid to this school because you said a racist joke in a tweet privately to someone else. Like,
yeah, I mean, we're totally headed in that direction, which is why we have to have tools that I agree with you on that note. We are 100% headed towards Chinese style social credit system, which will have those types of systems in place. It's very dangerous. We got to start using and demanding decentralized censorship resistant systems before we need them. Otherwise we will get fucked.
Yeah, I have two more things to add real quick. Actually, Q, it's actually very funny you should bring that up. A few years ago, Mark Cuban was being investigated by the SEC. I'm not the biggest fan of Mark Cuban, is what it is. But that being said, they were subpoenaed his text messages and emails. And he's friends with a guy who works on Wall Street. And in the context, you could definitely read it like he was joking, but the SEC took it out of context. He was like it seemed like he was busting his buddy's balls. Like, you couldn't make money even if the stock market was ripping and whatever. They're like, oh, so you're telling him to sell. And they were trying to prove that he was trying to manipulate markets with sell. He's like, what are you talking about? I was making fun of my buddy who's horrible at trading stocks. And they were trying, to your point, like, at what point do you draw the line and be like, it's a joke versus you're manipulating markets? So it is kind of a weird precedent. I will mention the one last thing with Anomaly. He's never really mentioned cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. He's talked about the dangers of CBDCs, but I hope that a lot of people in his comments are saying, I think this is time you learn a little something about Bitcoin. I obviously hope he gets his channel restored, and I hope his website is returned to normal functioning ability. But to P's point, like, this is something that we have to build in the Bitcoin community and the community at large to try and be adversarial in our thinking with any of our platforms. I mean, let's be honest, our YouTube has been shut down a few times ourselves. We haven't really figured out why for what reasons, but we are trying to build out other platforms and places where we publish our content. Yeah.
Shout out Rumble.
Yes, definitely. Shout out to our Rumble crowd.
Cool. I somehow managed to not get us kicked off of YouTube today, although that was on my goal sheet. So I'm disappointed, but we shall continue. Look, I'm a big proponent of follow the actions, not their words. And it looks like the US government is pro Bitcoin. What do I mean? Well, the US government employees are accepting Bitcoin from Chinese intelligence officers. There's a report that Chinese intelligence officers have paid $61,000 in Bitcoin bribes to US government employees in a plot to obstruct prosecution of PRC-based company, of a PRC-based company. This according to the Department of Justice. All I have to say is check and mate. Like, can we just further validate and use this as an example of why Bitcoin being used by criminals and illegal organizations and for drugs and all of that, like, it's so stupid to do it. And this is yet another example of why you shouldn't commit crimes, A, and then B, if you're going to commit crimes and get paid for them, don't get paid in Bitcoin because you will get caught every fucking time. Truly remarkable, though, that this time the people getting caught are the U.S. government.
You good there?
No, my dog is doing that weird thing on the bed sheet, and I kind of feel like I should tell him to stop doing. Yeah, I gotta tell him
what is happening.
He's doing.
All right,
we're gonna keep going, my friends.
We'll let Q sort out his dog issue there.
His dog is doing terrible things to his bed sheet. We don't want to know what they are, but you can imagine in your mind picture.
Pete, what do you got? What do you got for this story?
Yeah, I want everybody to pay attention to the framing around the story that just came out today, which is that Chinese spies used Wasabi, that's a privacy enhancing tool, Wallet Mixer, to pay Bitcoin bribes to FBI double agents. Now, why am I saying paying attention to the framing? Because the news media is focused on trying to associate privacy enhancing tools with nefarious activities. You will never hear stories about the stories that come out of the HRF and the Human Rights Foundation and the stuff that Alex Gladstein talks about. We had an incredible panel at Bitcoin Amsterdam around people that have been using Bitcoin as a tool to help them escape oppressive regimes. You will never hear those stories in mainstream media. What you will hear instead is these kinds of cherry-picked bullshit stories about, coin mixing tools that are they will be painted and continue to be painted in a negative light. So that's the story. Chinese spies, quote unquote, used coin mixing service Wasabi to try to hide their tracks and use Bitcoin. But we all know better than that. It's bullshit.
Yeah, I think, we just saw recently, we've talked about for months now, that them going after Tornado Cash. If you don't think Wasabi is going to be the next thing that gets banned, I think you got another thing coming for you. Or maybe even larger than Wasabi, they're just going to try and ban all privacy tools. So very dangerous precedent.
Absolutely. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. Q, any thoughts there? We were just talking about the Chinese spies use the Wasabi mixer to pay the bribes to the FBI agents.
Look, this again echoes what we saw. I don't know if you guys mentioned the Tornado Cash of it all, but this is everything that we said about the Tornado Cash incident. This is going to be precedent used against Bitcoin in some way in the near future.
Yep.
This is exactly it. This is their attack vector. They're simply pointing out how it's being used to justify a future attempt at everyone who uses Wasabi is about to get royally fucked. I should probably not admit. So yeah, stop using Wasabi.
No, I have a different take. It's like use whatever privacy enhancing tool you want, but understand that we are in the middle of this battle and it's not going to be fought fairly. It's going to be through narrative manipulation as we're seeing here. So, I don't use Wasabi, but it's a personal choice. Whatever choice you make, understand the risks and understand what we're fighting against. But we all have to be fighting for privacy and understand that privacy is for everyone. That'd be my take.
I think there's one more thing. I remember hearing Jack Mallers, the CEO of Strike, talk about this in a podcast recently. He was mentioning that a billionaire, he didn't allude to who, but a billionaire was like, Jack, I love what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Just know, you're going up against the legacy financial system. You're going up against one of the most powerful groups or units in the world. And he's like, Jack, I'm you can outcode them. You can outprogram them. You're very energetic and you're going up against a behemoth. No, they're going to not fight you on fair grounds. So they're going to try and burden you in regulations. And the tip that he got is he's like, Jamie Dimon spends over 100 days a year in Washington, D.C. talking to regulators. So he's like, know that when you go to fight him, he's going to demand that you fight him on his turf in D.C. or through regulation. So they're definitely regulations going to try and stifle Bitcoin and the crypto industry at large. And they're not going to fight fair. I don't think they ever do.
Shout out to friend of the show, Jason Brett, who is fighting a good fight, and all the good folks at BPI's, the Bitcoin Policy Institute, David Zell, Grant, and Troy Cross, everyone there, because they are taking it to the streets, so to speak. And by the streets, I mean Washington, D.C. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so Coinbase, they might as well be offering CBDCs, or I guess custodial tokens or whatever, or they might as well just be operating fiat for you. What do I mean by this? Coinbase, the MakerDAO community, has approved our proposal to custody up to $1.6 billion in USDC with Coinbase. MakerDAO was, I think it was like a DeFi contract that allows you to stake your tokens or coins in this. And it was supposed to be decentralized finance. And it was supposed to be, finance without needing a central party or government or whatever. And they have just given the keys to the castle over to Coinbase. And Coinbase is now, they can stop them for any reason. The U.S. government can stop them for any reason. I don't understand what the point is. I know the crypto people are like, we're trying to make yield. We're trying to yield farm. We're trying to token farm. All these marketing bullshit terms. Bitcoin made it go down 70, 80%. And, that happens. But what's worse than having your net worth go down 70 and 80%? 100% when it gets confiscated by the government or the banks or by any other organization.
Or by Celsius or by Alex Machinsky or whoever the fuck.
Yeah, whoever the fuck. Anything you lend out is a risk in anything. So that's just my two sats. P, I know you want to dive in here. What else do you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to really hammer home when we talk about MakerDAO. DAO stands for decentralized autonomous organization. Now, DAOs are not unique to the Ethereum space, but that's where they are the most popular, and they've just been some spectacular blowups. Some of the largest
Largest hacks were there.
Yeah, largest hacks, and the hacks are just crushingly embarrassing. It's literally like one of the most famous ones was somebody was just poking around in the code and they're like, hey, what's this button do? Oops, now there's like hundreds of millions of dollars that are like gone and they're mine now. And that kind of stuff is happening again and again. And it is truly hilarious, to your point, that they have just agreed to put 1.6 billion USD in Coinbase Prime because, as you pointed out, it just centralizes everything. And they're doing it for only 1.5% yield, which is fucking ridiculous. I tweeted out a couple days back, it's from some random Twitter account of like baby birds when they first are trying to learn how to eat. They're so used to their mothers feeding them worms that when baby birds first have to, when they're trying to get worms, they literally just like open their mouth and they expect the worms to just like leap into their mouths. And there's this hilarious little video of a bird like, and the worm is just jumping away. And I feel like that is how a lot of these crypto bros interact with what they think of as value. They're like, where's the yield? Where's my yield? I need my yield. And they'll do anything to get it.
Well, now let me ask you this. Video is hilarious, honestly. Like, everyone should just take the 5 minutes while they're pooping today and just sit there and watch it on a loop. But that example aside, I want to specifically talk about yield because I agree it's a stupid and silly concept, but we were raised in a proof of stake system that told you to garner some form of interest against your money in the bank account. And we were sort of lied to for years, being told like these like fractions of a percent of interest that you get that's the dream compared to the inflation that's going on behind the scenes. So how much of this reliance or desire to get yield on their money do you accredit to the fact that we've just been raised in this system to park your money and have it grow in some capacity?
Yeah.
Because that idea of just leave your money and you're not doing anything with it. You're not spending it, but you're not like, it's not making you money in that same age old saying of like, have your money work for you. Like when you store Bitcoin in self-custody, it's not, if we want to be literal and direct about this.
Yeah, I'll take this one. So Q, that's a great point. I think this goes down the question of what is money. And we could literally have a 10-hour long talk session about this, but I'll keep it brief. Basically, we've operated that the US dollar or any fiat currency is money. It is not money. It is actually a debt instrument. What that means is people use it as money. They try and use it as a currency to transact and buy things. But people get tricked into believing that it's actually money. So it's a debt instrument, meaning that it is debt that the US government owes. Those US dollars, if all the debts were paid off, there would be no US dollars in existence. So we've built this house of cards that always more debt needs to come into the system. When you buy a house and you take out a mortgage, the bank is creating credit or debt in the way of doing this by creating US dollars into existence that weren't there before. So basically, people have always said you do not want to hold US dollars if you're smart because that will disintegrate over time. In the last 100 years, the US dollar has gone down 96%. All other fiat currencies have fallen more than that in the last 100 years. And then the really bad currencies have fallen 100% and they lose their currency privileges. So that's just my brief explanation. So people are always fleeing, whether it's the US Treasury, like the bonds, whether it's stock market, which used to be stocks with dividends or value stocks. Now it's gone to, keeps pushing the risk further and further down the risk curve to riskier and riskier things. And now it's gone into the crypto market, which is even full degen risk. But I'll just leave my 2 cents there. Anything else you guys want to add?
No, I think you're both absolutely right. The expectation of yield is reasonable. It's the not understanding what Bitcoin is and the value of holding your own keys and sound money. That's the real problem. But let's keep it going.
I should probably unmute myself. Twitter is going full crypto degen, sort of. In everyone's worst fears after Jack Dorsey stepped down from Twitter, where it became a very Bitcoin focused platform, a lot of the fear was that, as Parag joins, they may expand into just shit coins and crypto at large rather than staying true to what Jack believes and what many Bitcoiners believe to be the only viable and the best cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. It looks like Twitter is working on a wallet prototype that supports crypto deposits and withdrawal. I don't hate this, but I don't love this, and I'm not neutral on this. So I'm trying to determine if I'm like light neutral or light hatred or light liking. The reason I don't like it is because it's crypto oriented. Of course, if this was a Bitcoin only wallet, that would have been better. I'm assuming, not no knowledge on this, just drawing an assumption that you will still be able to deposit Bitcoin into this wallet. So this does look like a step in a direction. Whether that direction is the direction we want people to be going in or not, that is a whole other conversation. But I do think this invigorates, this recharges a discussion and conversation around self-custody. Why do I need to put any of my cryptos in this wallet? What's the point of this wallet? And then you start to ask these questions. Like, these are the questions that I'm now asking because I don't know what to do with all my Doge. I'm kidding. I do not have any Doge. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, for those who don't necessarily view things the way we view them, the questions they should be asking themselves during this process should hopefully allow them to learn a little bit more. And all it takes is that one thing that they figure out before they realize, like, wait, this doesn't, if that's what this is all about, then why the fuck do I own any Doge? Like, they're just going to print more and more Doge every day. And eventually my Doge will just diminish in value, even though it's literally diminished in value consistently for the last 18 months. I wanted to leave at a hanging note there.
Go for it, Chris.
I think that with them developing a wallet prototype, I know we've talked about the different levels of self-custody. So obviously you can buy Bitcoin and leave it on an exchange. We don't recommend that. Then there's a hot wallet to step up. Then cold storage is a step up from that. And then there's distributed multi-sig. P's setup is beautiful with the whale, the eagle, and the alligator, or whatever the mix of
those cheetah,
animals
but
are.
I understand.
Cheetah, yes. Sorry. I would not want to fuck with an alligator nonetheless. But with that being said, this is kind of like, this is going back to an exchange. I know that there was a hack recently on, I forget what exchange it was. And you're basically you're delegating the risk to the exchange. And not saying they don't have the best interest at heart, but like, let's just say you were to leave this on this Twitter wallet. If they don't have an encrypted way of storing your private keys, or you generate your private keys on this hot wallet, it's like a hot wallet. It's worse than a hot wallet, because they have servers at Twitter, and if you generate the private keys and they figure out a way, they can essentially, I don't want to say steal your money, but hackers are more primed, or it's a honeypot that they can try and attack to get more of users' funds.
Yeah, it's definitely infinitely worse than a hot wallet, right? Because on the sort of custody spectrum, you have having it on an exchange where basically all you have is a piece of, or not even a piece of paper. You have a digital piece of paper that says, like, we owe you, 1/10 of a Bitcoin or whatever it is. And then you have like a hot wallet, which is where you, have your own private keys, but it's still connected directly to the internet. And thus somebody can, potentially hack that device or use an exploit to get access to those private keys. And then of course you have cold storage. And, there's finer gradations there in terms of systems like Fedi, which we talked about recently. And, yesterday talking with John about, what was the topic of the spaces we had yesterday?
Which one? Because we had two. We had one about macro, and we had one about rollups.
Yes, there we go. Rollups. Thank you. There's a custody spectrum, but Chris, your point still stands. And I'll just throw my 2 cents and say, I think that things that legitimize Bitcoin, legitimize the space are good, but we also want to be careful about people being encouraged to play the casino game, right? Because that's what Coinbase, that's what Kraken, that's what all these exchanges are really in it for. They have these educational systems which are designed to actually get people to trade on their platforms. And the more people trade, the more people buy it and exchange these shit coins, the more money these exchanges make. So you got to always remember that if there's a platform that offers multiple tokens, that's their game. Regardless of all the posturing they do, that's their game. They want you to trade. They want you to buy all this bullshit.
Cool. On that note, I want to remind everyone that tickets for Bitcoin 2023 are on sale now. Use promo code BMLive to get 10% off. The conference is going to go down May 18th to the 20th. We are coming back to Miami for a three-peat. If you have not been to any of the last two conferences, if you missed Bitcoin Amsterdam, you got to do it. You need to come to Bitcoin Disneyland in Miami, May 18th to the 20th. Use promo code BMLive, get 10% off your tickets before ticket prices go up. We're going to cut to a commercial break, and then we're going to be joined by Vijay Boyapati. Thank you for sticking through those commercial breaks, everyone. And I am excited to introduce our guest today, one of my favorite Bitcoin authors and formerly a software engineer. He is the author of the book, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, which, as I've told you all at the beginning of the show, is now required reading. So everyone needs to read it by the end of this week if you have not already. Vijay Boyapati, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Q. It's great to be with you guys again.
Great to have you. I saw you rocking out to that song. Sorry. the song we were playing. I saw you off camera dancing. Q, please continue.
Everyone always does. Vijay, I want to just sort of start with, we are in the midst of a very long Bitcoin winter. If you do not believe it is a bear market, I have a doctor who will prescribe some medication for you. Shout out Dr. Jeff Ross. But Vijay, I guess my first question to you is just what is it right now today that has you still bullish about Bitcoin and its potential for the future?
So I agree with you. I think we're in a bear market, and I think I called the bear market. Let's see. I think I was a little bit early, but I think I called it somewhere in June or July. I thought the bear market was starting. I think it's probably correct to say it started a little bit later in 2021. So I agree with that part. And I think what we're seeing is a compounding of both Bitcoin's natural cycle, which we've seen these bear markets before, with the macroeconomic picture. That explains why this bear market feels as painful as it does. I don't really think it doesn't, to me, feel that long. I've been observing Bitcoin since 2011. The longest bear market in my memory was the one from 2013 till the beginning of 2017. That I thought was the most painful and still the most painful Bitcoin bear market, because it really did feel like, wow, this thing might not come back. It just kind of felt like crickets. Like during the bear market, there was no interest in Bitcoin. Some of the big voices in the community had just kind of, they really rage quit. Like Mike Hearn was a very well-respected developer at the time, and he fully rage quit. He wrote a piece in the New York Times like, this thing is dead. I'm not interested in it. I'm out. And there really was very little interest anywhere. People weren't talking about Bitcoin. It wasn't being written about. That was a really, really tough time for people who believed in Bitcoin. I think this is actually very different. I think Bitcoin is now fully established as a macro asset. The price has dropped, yeah. Okay, it's down to 20,000. But if someone had told you 3 or 4 years ago Bitcoin is going to crash to $19,000, $20,000, you'd be like, whoa, that's amazing. We've made it. This illustrates one of the aspects of money that people don't really understand, which is path dependence. That is, you can't value money based on its cash flow, because gold and Bitcoin are monetary assets. They don't produce cash flow. And so they get valued by this kind of market process of people trying to determine, it's a game theoretic process, people trying to determine, is this better money than all the other monies that are out there? Is it better than gold? Is it better than dollars? Is it better than silver? Is it better than Ethereum? All the competitors that are out there. And that process kind of works in these cycles that we've seen, where people get really enthusiastic, and then you run out of steam, and then you have a crash. So the thing about monetary assets, the point I'm trying to make about monetary assets is that they don't have cash flow, and so you have to measure their worth as a monetary asset against other competitors and along the attributes that make for a good money. And what are those attributes? They are things like divisibility, portability, transmittability. How easy is it to transmit? And most importantly, scarcity. And along this one critical attribute that all monies need, Bitcoin is the best form of money that's ever existed. This hasn't changed. This fundamental aspect of what makes Bitcoin good, or I think the best money, hasn't changed. It's just the market goes through these cycles of people trying to understand what it is, and people getting overexcited and then kind of losing hope. And each one of these cycles is defined by a group of people. In the first cycle, the group of people was very small. There were only people who could understand Bitcoin, cypherpunks, computer scientists, and maybe some hardcore libertarians. It was a very small circle of people. But each cycle, that circle gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we have gone through a cycle where we actually brought in a lot of retail investors. But there's many, many more retail investors. There's many more institutions. There's many more nation states out there. And a lot of them got a taste of Bitcoin. They may have given up and said, oh, this thing has failed, but maybe they bought a little bit. Maybe they bought, say, 1% of their portfolio, or maybe even $100, and they gave up on Bitcoin. But those people are primed to come back in the next cycle. Now, I'll give you one example of this. Stanley Druckenmiller is a very famous macro investor, billionaire, very successful over a very long period of time investing in making macro bets. He owned Bitcoin during this last cycle, and very recently I heard him say that he doesn't own any Bitcoin. Now that sounds bad. Okay, he's given up on Bitcoin, but he has been mentally captured. He is always going to pay attention to the price of Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin starts slowly but surely, as it always does in every cycle, slowly but surely coming back, he will be paying attention. He'll be like, oh, it hasn't died. It's been stuck around 20K or whatever it is, wherever it finds its plateau. It's been stuck around that level for a long time. It hasn't gone away. And it looks like it's creeping up. Now it's, 23, 24, 25, maybe 30K. People like him will come back because they've been exposed to Bitcoin. They've been mentally captured. They've had enough touch points where they've heard about it enough, or they've invested a little bit, and they're going to come back. And this is the same thing that happens every cycle. The same thing happened back in 2017, where a bunch of people got burnt and they bought Bitcoin at 19 or 20,000 and it dropped to 3,000. And they're like, oh, why did I do that? It was a terrible investment. But then they were paying attention in the current cycle, which is kind of finished. And they came back in because they noticed Bitcoin. They knew about it. They knew how to invest. They were primed to put more capital in. So each cycle, the people who are primed to come in is much bigger. And the number of people who are ready to come in the next cycle, especially institutions and high net worth individuals, is gigantic. Some of the things that we saw, I think people got overly excited. They saw Michael Saylor coming in. They saw El Salvador, and they thought this cycle is the cycle when we're going to have every high net worth individual, every corporation, every nation state, they're all going to pile in. I actually think what you got was just a taste of what we'll see in the next cycle. And I was really surprised, and I said this on many podcasts, I was really surprised to see El Salvador come in. I didn't think a nation state would do what El Salvador did for a few cycles into the future. And so what happened, I think, is what I expected, which is most nation states will stand back and not do anything. But now I think many more of them are going to be primed in the coming cycles to come in and do what El Salvador did. So I think there are many, many reasons to be bullish about Bitcoin. None of the fundamentals have changed. None of the attributes that make Bitcoin superior to all its competitors, none of that has changed. The number of people who have been exposed to Bitcoin is much, much larger. What you have, if you've been around for a while, or you listen to people who've been around for a while, is an incredible opportunity. The best time, if you're one of those people around in a bear market, the best time to invest is right now. The best time to get exposure, to learn more about Bitcoin, to do something for Bitcoin, to go and build a business in the Bitcoin space is right now. The people who are around now, who are either building businesses, investing, or learning about Bitcoin, they are the people who are going to be most successful in the coming cycle. What you don't want to be, and what always disappoints me, is the people friends and family I speak to, they only get interested right at the end of the cycle. And it's the same every single cycle. I've been through 4 of them now, I think. people come to me at the end of the cycle and they're like, tell me about Bitcoin. How do I invest in Bitcoin? I'm like, I'm really glad you're interested in Bitcoin, but just be careful, because Bitcoin is cyclical. It goes through cycles. Learn about investing in Bitcoin. Put a small percentage of your portfolio in there, because I usually think about it as they're not really ready. They're going to come back the cycle after, and they're going to get a little bit burnt. I don't want them to get too burnt so they never come back. But if you're around now, if you're listening, if any of your listeners are thinking about this, if you're around now, there's a huge opportunity. They don't come around that often. It's once every 4 years. And eventually these cycles are going to stop when Bitcoin gets to complete full adoption. And I think we're only maybe 3 or 4 cycles away from that. So I am really excited. I think this is the best time to be interested in Bitcoin. None of the fundamentals have changed. So get out there and learn about it. Get out there and invest. Get out there and build. Now is the time.
I just want to really hammer this point home, but this is that moment, both when everyone should be taking the time to really learn as much, if not more than ever, about Bitcoin, about a different component, facet. And I really cannot emphasize enough how helpful Vijay's book and essay were in helping me to better understand and appreciate just answering the question of what is money is a question that I don't think a lot of people spend enough time asking themselves. But I also don't think those who have, but for lack of a better word, like money managers, don't really understand that concept or that question of what is money. I have long been asking this question to P, and I've never liked his answer. So Vijay, I asked this question to you.
How dare you?
The promise of Bitcoin is not unlimited wealth. It is this freedom from the fiat money and systems that we have created. However, my fear is that if we have Michael Saylor and Stanley Druckenmiller and the Chamath Palihapitias of the world aping into Bitcoin, their 0.01% allocation is more than my entire net worth. And so if we have too many of these high net worth individuals start to be the only people that are whole coiners, and then we have those who have already been left out of fiat, unable to afford a whole Bitcoin, do we not repeat, or are we not at risk of repeating the cycles and systems that have failed us in the fiat system in this future Bitcoin system?
I think that's a fair concern for sure. I would say a lot of these billionaires are actually really late. They're not early. The people who have been interested in Bitcoin, who are early, are the kind of people that I'm hopeful for can change society as Bitcoin becomes money. People who believe in freedom and the importance of the rights of individuals. Like, I found out about Bitcoin from fellow Ron Paul supporters, who have a set of values that I really support. And, I left my job at Google, very lucrative job at Google, to go campaign for Ron Paul. And that didn't work out. And it was really sad, depressing period of time for a few years. I was like, this political process is completely broken. We're never going to get these ideas through. Then I discovered Bitcoin in 2011. I'm like, wow, there is a way, not through politics, but through technology, that we can change the world and push these ideas forward. Sound money, hard money, the ability to keep the fruits of your labor without a central power confiscating the fruits of your labor. The importance of nation states not interfering or going to war with other nation states, and how hard money will make that more difficult. These values, I think, will be transmitted because a lot of early Bitcoiners have those values. It is true that you'll have some wealthy individuals coming in, but I still think it's a fairly small proportion compared to just regular people. At least in my experience, I think Stanley Druckenmiller and Michael Saylor are exceptions. They're not the rule. So far, I am hopeful. I think it's a valid concern, but I'm hopeful from what I've seen in the history of observing Bitcoin, that a lot of people who have come in are plebs, friends and family, people who are fellow travelers in terms of ideology. So, the people who, it's interesting, the people who I think have very different ideologies in a way don't like Bitcoin. And so they are going to be, unfortunately for them, they're going to be last in line. And I'm thinking about people like Elisabeth Warren, who thinks Bitcoin is this gigantic scam that's going to destroy the environment. And she's completely mistaken. It's a technology which actually is going to help the environment a lot. It's going to make energy grids much more efficient. It's going to provide a huge incentive for renewable energies in places where otherwise it wouldn't be possible to develop those renewables. But a person like her, a person like Paul Krugman, they're going to be way back in line to join. They're only going to start using Bitcoin when they're forced to, because no one else will transact with them. And they'll go to the grocery store and they'll come with their dollars, and the grocer will say, I don't take those anymore. I don't want those. I want Bitcoin. So I'm hopeful about that. And that's the trend I have seen. But anything can happen. Maybe Paul Krugman changes his mind, and maybe a bunch of warmongering extreme communists decide Bitcoin is the greatest thing ever and they start investing in it. I hopeful that doesn't happen, but maybe it will.
I want to address, the politicization and polarization that Bitcoin has just sort of been thrust into. Bitcoin is apolitical. You touch on a little bit about how those who have, I think, a more libertarian value set seem to have seen the value proposition of Bitcoin earlier and sooner. But we've seen, especially in this most recent cycle, it's not only libertarians that are involved in Bitcoin. However, the portrayal of Bitcoin in the mainstream media has almost turned into this, oh, it's a tool for the quote unquote far right wing, the anti establishment. And if you are pro establishment, you must therefore be anti Bitcoin. I, I personally, I hate this rhetoric. And this isn't as someone who doesn't want to be considered right or anything. I don't want to be considered right, left, or center for that matter. I want to be considered a human being. Why has Bitcoin been thrust into this political space, and how do we almost change the narrative or conversation with the likes of Elisabeth Warren or just her supporters? Because her supporters are who I'm more concerned about winning over than I am about winning Elisabeth Warren over.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're absolutely correct. Bitcoin as a tool, as a network, as a monetary good is completely neutral. Bitcoin does not care who uses it. It does not care if you are libertarian. It doesn't care if you're a hardcore fascist. It does not care. It doesn't care if you're criminal or if you're innocent. I think the reason it's become politicized is because there's this fundamental difference of opinion among certain people about what money is and who should control it. There are a bunch of economists who had very, very long time who had this theory that money did not emerge as a market-based process. And this is well before Bitcoin. They talked about money in terms of government created this thing and it provided it to society as a tool for people to use and to allow for commerce. It's called the Chartalist school of monetary economics, and there's a different school which is that money is something that's produced by the market. It emerges out of the market from the individual desires of participants in the market to have a tool to conduct trade with each other, and that is how gold emerged as money. It wasn't because some government said, okay, we need this tool, gold is going to be money, we're going to use gold. That's not how money came about. And this is the school of economics that I subscribe to, that money is a market-based phenomenon. It emerges because of incentives, not because of a fiat decree. It does not emerge because the government says we need it. It emerges because we each individually need it. I need Bitcoin because I want to keep my savings in something that can't be taken away from me and can't be debased. That is my individual need. I was not told by anyone, you have to use Bitcoin. I used it because of my own desire. In terms of the debate, I think it's a sort of grassroots thing, and I think you already see this, and it's emerging in communities maybe a little later than it would emerge in a libertarian community, but amongst progressives and liberals, there is a community of people who see the value of Bitcoin, and you actually see a lot of writing and material being produced now. There's a book called The Progressive Case for Bitcoin, which I supported on Kickstarter. And if you're a liberal or progressive and you're skeptical of Bitcoin, I strongly urge you to read the material in that book. And it will make the case to your values, the set of values that you have, and what the way you want to see the world. You shouldn't just rely on people like Elisabeth Warren, who's really quite ignorant about how Bitcoin even works, the incentive structure, why anyone would want to own it, and how it helps the value system that she supports. I think you should look for alternative perspectives. And there are people who are very progressive who support Bitcoin and have very good reasons to support Bitcoin. So I think the way it's going to work is that it's going to be a grassroots movement that happens. And eventually someone like Elisabeth Warren will say, I better start supporting it because my base of supporters support it. If I don't support it, I'm going to get kicked out of office. And this happens also on the economic sphere as well. Consider someone like Jamie Dimon, who really was very negative. He's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, one of the biggest banks on earth. He was very negative on Bitcoin. Then all of a sudden, as if by magic, he started softening his tone. And wow, JP Morgan start offering products. Why are they offering products in Bitcoin? It's because their clients were going to them and saying, I want exposure to Bitcoin. Where's the product? Give me the product. And they're a for-profit bank. They know that they have to serve the interests of their clients, or their clients are going to go to Bank of America or Fidelity or Vanguard. They've got so many options. This is the equivalent grassroots movement inside the banking sector. You can be as negative as you want, but if your base of support wants Bitcoin, you will change your perspective. So one day, Elisabeth Warren will change her perspective. It may take a long time, and unfortunately, she's harming her supporters and the people who listen to her and take her seriously, because she's telling them something which is false. And they are going to have to figure it out for themselves. And that's just putting them at the end of the line to figure out something that's hugely transformative. It's going to change the world, and it benefits you to be a part of as quickly as you can figure it out. Just like the internet, right? You don't want to be the guy in 2015 saying, what is this internet thing? Should I figure it out? You want to be the person in 2000 who figures out the internet and gets a sense of the opportunity and participates in it, builds something on it, starts a business around it. Same thing with Bitcoin. And I do feel a little bit sorry. I live in a very, very liberal, progressive city, and I do feel sorry for some of my friends who have been sold this false set of goods by people like Elisabeth Warren, who aren't curious about Bitcoin and will only figure it out down the line. As much as I try to convince them and give them my book or sit down and patiently explain why these arguments are false, it's just going to be that's going to be the case for some people. They're just going to have to figure it out later on when it becomes a necessity.
One thing that I think is very sad and also amusing is that we continue to see this pattern where every time Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin, goes up significantly, this narrative or this argument comes up. It's like, oh, we've already missed the boat. It's unfair that people are who got in early got lucky. And it's always presented as like, you're lucky. It's not like, oh, you understood the situation better than some other people. You took appropriate risk and you are benefiting from that. It's always like, these motherfuckers got lucky. And then when the price plummets, as it has now, like generational buying opportunity, that argument just evaporates. And suddenly the people that were making that argument previously are like, see, I told you so. And then when it goes back up again, they'll be saying the same thing. That drives me crazy.
Exactly right, P. And I think people don't understand the risk reward trade off. And I've sometimes during cycles I've tweeted like on the day when Bitcoin crashed below 20,000, as it was, all these huge liquidations related to Three Arrows Capital and Voyager and all these companies that went under and they were dumping their Bitcoin. I said, this is what real pain feels like. And if you're getting through this, if you're surviving, then this is not luck. It's extreme pain. It's extreme fear. And it's the moment when everyone around the world is hearing Bitcoin is dead. This thing is never coming back. And if you have the conviction to hold through that is why you deserve the returns. You've gone through that risk and that pain because you had enough conviction in the fact that this is fundamentally superior to its competitors, even though everyone around you is telling you that that's false. So I agree. Anyone who's made it through a bear market, they deserve everything that's coming to them. Their increase in standard of living, their ability to change their lifestyle, whatever it is, that they deserve that. And it is painful to hear. I agree with you. When those people are doing well, oh, you're lucky, you don't deserve this wealth. No. They put in the effort to understand this pretty complicated idea that is money, and to understand why Bitcoin in particular is superior money, and they held through the pain of a bear market. Not many people are able to do that, and your listeners, definitely the ones who are still around right now, they are the kind of people I think who deserve the returns that will come in the coming years.
Yeah, luck has nothing to do with it. It's excruciating, painful, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of personal growth, a lot of education, a lot of conviction. But all that goes out the window when people feel like they're hard done by.
Yep.
I want to echo everything that Q said. If you are listening to this and you have not read Vijay's book, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, you should absolutely check it out as soon as possible. It's a fantastic read. I want to ask you about your prognostications around CBDCs. There's no way one can answer this question, concretely, but I'm curious how you think we are likely to see CBDCs and the attempts to force their rollout across the world go. I think my own view is we're headed towards a social credit system style CBDC in the United States, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that if you have any.
I think there's no surprise that the country that's pioneering CBDCs is China, a fully authoritarian kind of panopticon society where everything you do is always watched. And they literally have cameras everywhere with AI built in that can track faces. They know where each person is at all times. And they want to put their fingers into people's financial lives as well. So the way you do that is with CBDCs. If you have a digital token where you can associate it with a person through KYC and you know where they are, you can know what everyone is doing down to the minutest transactions. And that's a really, really scary development. I think there'll be a push and a motivation in Western societies, liberal democracies like the US and the UK and Australia and Canada, to follow that path, because people who are in the bureaucracy will see this as an advantage that China has, an economic advantage, and they'll say, well, we need to do this too. They've developed a digital currency and they're ahead of us. The thing that makes me, a little bit hopeful is that there's still a remnant in these countries which have a strong belief in freedom. And if you push policies which are really invasive like this, there's a lot of pushback. And I think I'm very hopeful from what I saw during COVID and this push for like forced vaccinations. Whatever you think about the vaccine and its efficacy, the idea that someone should be forced to do something, I think is really quite awful. Instead of using persuasion, like here's the reasons why you might want to take it, it's like, no, we're going to force you, and if you don't do it, we're going to kick your kids out of school. There was a lot of pushback. There's a very significant remnant in places like the US and in Canada that push back on this stuff. And I think CBDCs will be something that you will get a lot of pushback on, and it will be much harder to get it through in a country like the US than it is in China, where they have basically a dictatorship, and a President Xi can do whatever he wants. If he wants to push through CBDCs, he can just like sign a piece of paper and say, "Yep, we're going to have CBDCs." I think the dynamic is going to be very different in Western democracies, and I think it's still an open question. It could happen, but I think we're going to see much more pushback than you would expect, and it's not obvious to me that they're going to be adopted by central banks.
I'm muted. I pulled a P. Damn it. I want to, Vijay, get your thoughts though on, the idea that there are Western democracies exploring this, and it's not even being hidden. The idea and concept of a CBDC feels and reads as hyper authoritative. Do you feel as though, countries like Canada, the US, Australia, anywhere in the EU, even the fact that they are exploring this should be a sign to citizens that those days of you live in a free democracy have truly come to an end? Or am I just being a little too doomsday-y?
I think you should be concerned. I think it is maybe a little bit too doomsday-y or doomsaying to think it's inevitable. I mean, there's, through the history of the United States, a lot of very authoritarian ideas have been put forth. I mean, the Alien and Sedition Act was passed in like, what was it, 1796, I think, or no, sorry, maybe it was a little after that. But I mean, very early in the US's history, and that's a very authoritarian.
What did it specify exactly?
It said that if you criticize the policies of the US government or promoted the values of the French government, then you could be put in jail if you're a newspaper that did this. And this was when there was this huge debate between Jefferson and Adams about whether they should support the British or whether they should support the French. And people thought it was going to end up in a civil war. They really believed that the US was going to fall apart before 1800. So I'm giving this as an example to say that there have been very draconian authoritarian type laws. That was actually even passed. It was gutted later on after Jefferson became president, and he said, "This is not what we are. These aren't our values." But the US has had a long history of this. I mean, go to the Civil War. There are a lot of very draconian policies as well. Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, which is one of the most fundamental values of a free society. So my point is, we need to fight this. That's how we fix this. We need to push back. We need to explain why this is not compatible with a free nation. And I think we can do that. And I think we need people like you guys to explain it to your listeners, and also people to reach out to their senators or their congressmen and say, "I really don't like this. Please don't do this." They pay attention to stuff like that, and then it filters into Congress, and you have people like Senator Lummis who will be talking about this and saying this is not compatible with a free society. And I think she's already talked about this. So I'm hopeful that we can arrest the progress of something like this in our country, because we don't get top-down dictates. It does seem like it sometimes, but we can push back, and pushing back actually does have some effect.
All right, I've got a totally unrelated question for you. Are you ready?
Vijay, I just want, before P asks this, I apologize in advance, and this is not a reflection of me or Bitcoin Magazine.
It's so weird because you just texted me and you were like, "Bro, ask him the question. Ask him the question."
I'm worried now.
No, none of that is true. It's a totally reasonable question. Or is it? No. The question is, I've built it up so much now. Everyone is going to be disappointed. Years from now, children are going to be like, "This was such a terrible buildup." The question is, last time you were on the show, you told us a great story about the first Bitcoin, I think, that you mined on your laptop. You talked about you first got excited about Bitcoin, and then you had something on your laptop. You left the laptop with a significant other, and then later it was worth tens of thousands of dollars, and you reached back out, and this person was like, "Oh, that's just gone." My laptop got stolen. It's gone. Tell us another, what's the craziest Bitcoin story that you have around losing your keys or just anything? Your craziest Bitcoin story. When Guy Swan was on, he told us about almost burning his trailer down. I'm not sure exactly how it was related to Bitcoin, but I'm going to pretend that it was. Tell us a story like that.
I mean, I've heard so many stories. Some of them you guys have probably heard about, that I've read about. It was 5 Bitcoins. Those are the first 5 Bitcoins I got. And I won a bet with a friend, and the bet was for a silver coin, and they gave me 5 Bitcoins instead. But you're right, I did give that laptop which they were on to an ex-girlfriend, and then she lost it, and they're worth what about $100,000 right now. I've heard so many stories of people almost losing their keys, and just the cold sweat that you get through. And I like to say, you haven't lived until you felt that fear of forgetting like the password to your hardware wallet, and you don't know whether it should be an O or a 0, or there's an extra character. Like the fear that comes from that. I've certainly felt that fear. That's what it means to be alive. That moment where you're like, oh no, I don't have any Bitcoin anymore.
I love that. It's like you thought you were alive and you'd experience the intensity of risk throughout your life, and then you make your first significant Bitcoin transaction, and everything changes.
I mean, that's the moment when you realize that Bitcoin is different, right? It's different to a car. For instance, when you have the keys to your car, imagine if you had the keys to your car and you lost them, and then the car vanished instantly, and you went outside and there's no car.
I love that.
and you could never get it back. That's the feeling. You just spent like $50,000 in a car, but you lost the keys somewhere. You don't know where. Maybe at the grocery store, the car's not there. Yeah. So that, I did have, there was someone I knew who had made, I think, about 5,000 Bitcoins mining in 2010. And he panicked in the Mt. Gox crash when it dropped to $2 from about $30, and he sold half his Bitcoin. And so he was down to something like 2,000 Bitcoin, and it was the 2013 cycle, and Bitcoin was going up to 1,000, and he was really excited that maybe he could buy a house or something like that. He didn't really have anything, and then he made a bunch of other mistakes. He was facilitating buys and sells between drug dealers and people who wanted to get Bitcoin. Time-honored tradition. And he ended up losing all his Bitcoin just dicking around. Like, he could have just held his Bitcoin. And I've heard plenty of stories like that over the years, where people have tried to be more intelligent than they needed. The hardest thing is the simplest thing. Just own it and don't do anything else. Just own it. And you, of course, I'm sure you guys have heard the stories of people throwing away their hard disks and they end up in the trash heap. And there's a story from England of the guy who has like 6,000 Bitcoins in the county dump. That's what they call it in the UK and Australia, the dump. And he's gone to the city council and said, I will give you a % of the value of those Bitcoins. And they're still refusing. They don't want him to dig up the dump. And he has this huge operation that he's hired a PR team and lawyers and like experts in just filtering through trash. That just sounds insane. That you've filtered through 8 years of trash that's been built up to find a single hard disk that has keys, and who knows if the hard disk works or not. So there are so many fun stories, crazy stories out there, and I've heard them all because I've been around for a long time, paying attention to Bitcoin, and some of them are fun to hear. Like, I think mine is kind of fun because I lost those 5 Bitcoins, but it introduced me to Bitcoin, and so I don't feel bad. Those 5 Bitcoins are a donation to everyone else. So essentially,
thank you for your sacrifice.
I reduce the supply. It's not 21 million. It's 21 million minus 5.
I was listening to the previous episode you guys did. just before this one, and the person I was hanging out with was like, yeah, but I mean, that's what she would say, even if she'd stole it. And I was like, oh no, keep listening. Cause then you're like, that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's all on the blockchain. So like, you're able to go and see and be like, that Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly
still there,
right.
it
And I
hasn't moved.
checked. I did, trust but verify. I verified. I went to the blockchain, and those Bitcoins have not moved since they were sent to me in 2011. So they've been sitting there dead for over a decade, and they will remain there for the next decade.
All right, so let's go in another direction. We've been talking a lot lately about how we can bring Bitcoin to as many people as possible, as rapidly as possible. And, talking about things like, federated Chaumian mints and the work that Obinwasu is doing. We talked yesterday about roll-ups on Bitcoin, the potential for those. I'm curious, and those are from a technical perspective, but I'm curious what you think, either from a technical or from a cultural or financial, what the largest hurdle to Bitcoin's global adoption is right now.
I think easy access is probably the big one. People being able to have an on-ramp where they can take their savings and transfer those into Bitcoin. That's always the biggest one. I think time is another one. I like to say that information moves at the speed of light in our world, but understanding does not. Understanding takes time. And I think these cycles are a function of people's growing understanding of Bitcoin across the world. In terms of ideas for increasing the speed of adoption, I had an idea for a product that no one's done, and I've mentioned it a few times. I'll tell you guys as well, and you can tell me if it's a stupid idea or not. But one of the things that got me about Bitcoin, I'm an all-time gold bug. And when I first understood Bitcoin, I'm like, wow, this is just like gold except with teleportation built in. This is amazing. I can like teleport gold to the other side of the world. That's what Bitcoin is. You can teleport value to the other side of the world. And I thought, well, couldn't we use that? Couldn't we do airdrops of Bitcoin? And I've had this idea for a long time, and I wish someone would build an app where I could take some Bitcoin, let's say 1 million sats, and I could airdrop them on a country like Bangladesh, a place where there isn't much Bitcoin adoption, and divide those million sats into blocks of 10,000. So little airdrops. Imagine airdropping food across the country. And all you need to pick up those sats is an app which geolocates you and says, yep, I'm in Bangladesh, and oh, there's an airdrop here. I can collect that. I think that would be so cool, just as a tool for charitable giving as well, to say, I have a number of Bitcoins that I want to drop on a location on Earth, and anyone who has the app can pick them up, and now they have sats. And not only do they have sats, but it creates a connection between me and that person, like a messenger connection, and they can message me and say, hey, thanks. I use that to buy some milk. I don't have much money, and I use that to buy some rice or milk or bread or whatever it is. I think that would be so cool, and I really wish someone would build this.
I mean, it seems like it'd be super straightforward. I mean, it would be, attack vectors, people could spoof their addresses, but I mean, you could do it right now with like
Yes.
QR codes or something like that. But then, of course,
Exactly right. So there's some technical issues. You're absolutely right, P. But it's an interesting problem. There are ways with at least iPhones that you can sort of validate that the geolocation is a valid
based on
one.
cell towers, yeah.
Yeah. So there are ways, and QR codes is another way. You could do something like proof of location. That's something else that could be built. A technology.
You're saying we need another blockchain.
I'm not going to say that. I think that there is value in being able to prove that you are at a place. If you want to give proof, hey, I'm in Seattle. Here is a QR code that proves I'm in Seattle, that literally you can authenticate. It would probably be more centralized, obviously. I'm not saying you need tokens or anything, but let's say Elon Musk created this service where he has satellites that could provide a proof that someone says they're in a location, that they are actually in that location, that anyone around the world can verify that that person is in that location. That would be really powerful, because then this idea would definitely be possible. And I just think it would be super cool that I could drop 1,000,000 sats on a country and then suddenly get connected to 1,000 people in that country who could all message me and we could talk about Bitcoin. That would be friggin' amazing. So I really, if anyone's, wish I had the time to build this, but I have 4 kids at home and they take a lot of time. I would love to build this product. But if anyone else is out there listening, go ahead and build it. Because I think it would be really valuable and a way to distribute Bitcoin. It would be like a more advanced version of faucets. I don't know if you guys remember faucets, but in the early days of Bitcoin, there were websites you could go to and they would say, just give me an address and you'll get 5 Bitcoins. It's absolutely insane how many Bitcoins these faucets provided. And it was a way to increase adoption. Like anyone could go and get Bitcoin just from a faucet. And Gavin Andreessen was someone who built one of these. I think it's the equivalent of a faucet, except it allows you to airdrop on people around the world.
I'd also just love, Vijay, we talked a little bit about the conversations out of the political space, but are there any types of legislation that either excite or worry you coming out of, we'll start here in America before we broaden up to the rest of the world?
I think one thing that worries me a little bit, and this has actually gone quite far, is legislation that's trying to apply rules that, that the banking system has to abide by onto Bitcoin. And these are really old, antiquated rules from the 1920s and 1930s. And one of them is the travel rule. And it does worry me that this is being pushed on businesses in the space. The travel rule is a rule that an exchange has to know the ultimate recipient of when someone withdraws Bitcoin. And you have to be able to prove, you have to KYC the destination, which is really terrible. That puts a huge burden on exchanges, and it also massively reduces privacy as well. Like imagine you bought some Bitcoin and you wanted to send it to a friend. You'd have to prove that that address was owned by that friend, and they would have to provide their passport and whatever. That's something that worries me. I think the industry has tried to push back on this a little bit, but those kind of things where you get more invasion of people's privacy, that does worry me a lot. And what's happened is the noose is tightening a little bit on society in terms of privacy. And I'll give you an example of this. There's an exception when you travel overseas or when you do a bank transaction that if it's less than $10,000, you don't need to report that. You don't need to report it. You don't need to, if you go fly to another country, you don't need to say anything if you're carrying $10,000. This number, $10,000, has been around since the 70s. Now, I'll tell you something, $10,000 is worth a lot less than it was in 1970. It's the equivalent of, say, $1,500 today, that value. And eventually, as the value of money decreases, $10,000 is not going to be worth that much. And it means that many, many more financial transactions are being reported to a central database that's controlled by the government. I worry about things like that where, because no one's paying attention and no one's doing anything and they're not indexing this number to inflation, it's a noose that gets tighter and tighter every year, and that we lose our privacy because of that. I think that's something that people need to pay attention to and push back on. And it worries me because no one talks about it. No one says, hey, this limit, this $10,000 limit has not been changed in 40 years, and $10,000 is much, much worth much less today than it was back then.
I gotta say, I was reading some comments and I did not like what the commenters were saying. Vijay, I wanted to also spend some time maybe just discussing like what is the biggest, most obnoxious piece of FUD that like garners a physical eye roll reaction from you. I don't mean just like a psh, it makes you sick when you hear this piece of FUD said. What is it, and what do you say to negate it?
That's a good one. I think the most dangerous piece of FUD is the ESG stuff, but that doesn't make my eye roll, because I think, if you want to steel man it, I think the people who are worried about the ESG stuff are coming from a good place. Maybe their thinking is muddled, but they want a better world for their children in the future. They don't want the environment harmed, but that doesn't give me an eye roll. I think it's like something like, why would I buy Bitcoin when I can get XRP, which is only a few cents? What? That's like the dumbest argument that exists out there. It's like the stock market. If a company splits its stock, and Apple splits its stock, it's $100, and now it's $50. It's not. Apple is not cheaper. It's not cheaper. What the valuation of the company is based on the market capitalization, the total market capitalization, and the same thing is true for Bitcoin. It's not the price of the individual unit that matters. And of course, you can price in sats if you really want to make you feel like it's cheaper. What matters is the total market capitalization of Bitcoin. And that capitalization is bigger because the market believes it has greater value for the things that, the purposes that money is supposed to serve in society: store of value, medium of exchange, unit of account. Bitcoin has more potential to do those things than anything else in the space. So you're not getting a bargain by buying Litecoin or XRP. And it's almost depressing when I hear those arguments, because they're so dumb. But I do cover it in my book. I do cover that as a misconception because it comes up a lot. And it's definitely one that makes my eyes roll. And anytime I hear about Bitcoin Cash, oh my goodness, my eyes roll even harder.
So you're saying
No, but see, here's the thing. I mean,
shitcoin.
you can't buy Bitcoin with coffee, or you can't buy a coffee with Bitcoin, the other way around. And so that's why you need a shitcoin. That's
Right.
That's what was explained to me.
Right. Yeah, that's another one that makes my eyes roll, is the whole coffee argument. Bitcoin is not suitable for buying coffee. And in a way, that's actually correct. It's not. It's a settlement system. It's this huge innovation to global settlement. And if you want to buy coffees, that's going to be built at higher layers of the system. That's why we have the Lightning Network.
Exactly. You can. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. It's just not going to be done at the base layer. It doesn't make sense to buy coffee on the blockchain. That I agree with. Yes.
But you can if you want
Correct.
to. But even more is,
you can if you want to, but yeah, use the Lightning Network. If you can, if you want to, you pay a fee, which is a very large fraction of the cost of the coffee. But the base level blockchain is not meant for that. It's fixed in size for a very good reason. And we had this debate in the block size wars. So it's not meant for that. It's like using the Federal Reserve bank settlement system, the FedWire system, to buy coffee. No one does that. No one does that. People use their credit cards, which is a higher layer in the financial stack. And the same thing is true of Bitcoin as well.
I mean, there are so many use cases coming out more and more, I think, as the days pass, of both examples of people literally buying a cup of coffee with Bitcoin and just ways to use Bitcoin more as a medium of exchange. I'm just curious your thoughts on whether you feel like Bitcoin as a money has reached the point where it has fulfilled its obligation as a store of value and is ready to take on the task of being a true medium of exchange, or if it still needs some more time to really establish and entrench itself as a store of value.
I don't think it has. I think it still has a long way to go. I think I call it an emerging store of value. I don't think it's an established store of value at all. And I think it will only become an established store of value if it's around for decades and people just accept Bitcoin's not going away. I think that transition will really happen around 20 years into Bitcoin's existence. At least I think that, because of what I saw with the internet. I think in the first decade of the internet's existence, a lot of people were like, what is this thing? Why is it useful? in the early 2000s. A decade ahead, 2010, I think it was pretty obvious that the internet was a permanent feature of the world. I think the same thing will be true of Bitcoin. Give it another decade, and people will believe it's a permanent institution of the world. And I think it'll be fully entrenched when it gets to the size of gold, when it has about the same capitalization of gold, which is, I think, I haven't checked, I haven't done my math recently, but I think that's about 50x from here. When what would that be? When Bitcoin gets to a price, maybe it's 20x or 25x. Maybe when Bitcoin gets to around 500,000, then I'll think of it as a pretty well established store of value with widespread ownership across the world, and it will be transitioning to becoming suitable as a medium of exchange, because a lot of the opportunity cost will have been taken out. One of the reasons people don't want to spend Bitcoin is the opportunity cost, because they've gone through the experience of buying something with Bitcoin and then it goes up 10x and they feel regret, and then they don't want to spend their Bitcoin anymore. I mean, I did this in 2014. I bought a Bitcoin ATM for 3 Bitcoin. It was about $1,000, and I never used the ATM. It didn't work. It's basically a doorstop in my house now. And after that next run up in Bitcoin, I was like, why did I spend those 3 Bitcoin? Why didn't I just buy it with dollars? I gave away a lot of that. Bitcoin now costs about $60,000 and it's going to go up more and more in the future. Eventually Bitcoin will plateau because everyone owns some, and that's when I think it'll become suitable as a medium of exchange, because that opportunity cost will be largely gone.
This is not financial advice, it's just what I do. But firstly, I give so much attitude when someone's like, oh, we only accept Bitcoin. Like, no, you need to take my dirty fiat because I don't want dirty fiat. And then I will inevitably cave, spend some Bitcoin, and then immediately turn around and buy more of said Bitcoin. I actually really rephrase that. I go buy Bitcoin first and then immediately spend it. There's no tax obligation there in case any IRS agents are listening. I want to throw some quick math. So we are 30x away from the market cap of Bitcoin being equivalent to the current market cap of gold, which would give a per Bitcoin price of roughly $600,000. I'm again just we're spitballing here, speculating a little bit, but Vijay, when the inevitable happens and Bitcoin starts to eat at some of the value in gold, do you envision gold like retaining some of its value at all, or will it really crater to being next to or nearly worthless?
Well, gold has 2 components of its value. One is its monetary demand, and that's people just holding gold bars or gold coins in reserve in their vaults, in their safes, or central banks do this as well. And a lot of high net worth individuals around the world do this. And then there's the industrial and jewelry demand. So even if Bitcoin outcompetes gold on the monetary side, there will still be residual demand for industrial uses and for jewelry. And I could see Bitcoin getting to the same scale as gold. I could see gold losing, say, 50 to 80% of its value. I don't think gold is going to go away completely. I also don't think gold will lose all of its monetary value, because I think some people will always want to own some gold, just because gold is it's not digital, and gold was never going away. Like in case of like apocalypse or Mad Max type scenarios, you may not be able to use Bitcoin. Like if the internet goes down, if there's something which destroys the world to a point where we're living very primitive life, gold will still be there. So I think gold is still going to maintain some value, but Bitcoin's monetization is definitely going to take some of that. And you already saw that in this cycle. There were a lot of high net worth individuals who had some allocation of gold that switched that allocation to Bitcoin. And that is demand at the margin being pulled away from gold and going into Bitcoin. So it's not a precise answer, but definitely some of gold's value will drain into Bitcoin.
Where are the other areas that you are paying closer attention to that Bitcoin will absorb value. I will throw out 3 examples that I myself am tracking: the real estate market as a whole, the bond markets, sovereign bond markets in general, as well as equity markets. Are there any other places where you think Bitcoin can and will absorb value from?
I would have said all 3 of those, so I completely agree. Maybe fine art is another one. There's kind of a store of value premium in fine art where people will take some of their wealth and I'll put it in there. It's not quite the same because with the asset classes you mentioned, there's a store of value premium. And real estate's an example of this, which is people aren't just using the asset for its use. Like a good example of this is in Vancouver, in Canada. We had a lot of people from China who put their savings into houses in Vancouver, not because they're living in those houses, but they wanted to have some savings outside of the country. And so the real estate market has a store of value premium in Vancouver. And that could certainly be drained. Fine art has some store of value premium, but it also has status premium. And that's something that probably won't go away because in all human societies, we have markers of status, things that we own that kind of show off that we are important or, special. And I don't think status premium is ever going to go away. But the big ones are the ones that you mentioned, government bonds, real estate, gold, equities as well. I think all of those could get hit. I think real estate is the big one. It certainly had a long history of people thinking it only goes up in value, and so it became a kind of store of value. I think that could change in the future as interest rates go up and stay at a higher level. People might start thinking, well, real estate isn't such a good investment. What is something, and it's not a good store of value for a number of reasons. Like you need to put money into maintaining a house. So it costs money. It takes time. It's not fungible. It's hard to sell. It's not liquid. There's so many reasons why it's an inferior store of value to Bitcoin. When you compare stores of value like gold, some of them could hold their own against Bitcoin a little bit, but real estate really can't, as a store of value, hold its own against Bitcoin. It's inferior across almost every aspect as a store of value. So I do expect real estate to lose some of that over the next decade.
I have my own theories, and I'm more than happy to discuss because I always love the idea of how do we make real estate for P is actually, Vijay, in case you didn't know this, so P is older than you and I and Chris combined.
This old chestnut.
So
it's true, I'm a vampire.
True. I'm pretty old.
No. So P.
This is so played out.
You say
the
it's
conceit
played
is
out.
that I'm a Highlander. Look, did I kill Duncan MacLeod in a fair duel? Yes. Did I absorb his magical powers? 100%. Am I the oldest Bitcoiner on the planet? Definitely.
P has been frozen and unfrozen enough times at this point to where he has seen so many different iterations of the universe. He actually, the first house he ever bought was for less than $10,000. And it was a 5-bedroom home. That's how old this house is.
You used to be able to buy an entire house in the Sears catalog for like, $500 or something.
Like
a revolver
2 weeks
used to
worth
cost
of salary,
like $6.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I wish I lived back then.
I know. Right? It's crazy though when I think of like, everybody used to have this idea of like, or at least I certainly did, like, oh man, I wish I could like, turn over a mattress somewhere and discover like a pile of cash, or like, break open a wall and there'd be like a bond certificate. And of course the problem is that like that fantasy is like no longer viable. It hasn't been for several decades, but it's like now if you found somebody's like mattress with cash stuffed in it, you'd be like, oh, it's like $1,000, like nice. Whereas like for them back then, that was like life-changing money.
You could buy a house. Yeah, you could buy a house with $1,000.
Yeah,
there was a point in time where $1,000 bought you a legitimate, like not just like the joke on Twitter I keep seeing are all the outhouses at different national parks. It's like, oh, I just bought this property for like $700,000 with 8% interest. And it's
you got to remember that $1,000 used to be $20 notes. And each of those $20 notes was a gold coin.
Those
50 gold coins. That is actually a lot of value right there. So I can see why that you could buy a house for that.
What is it? A gold coin used to supposed to be able to get you a good horse or an acre of land.
Mm-hmm. Or a cow. Yeah, I think one cow.
Damn, how far we have fallen.
Every day we fall farther from God's grace.
So I have my own theory that value, we can't suck it out. We, Bitcoin, cannot suck it out of real
Like snake
estate.
venom?
Sure. I guess not. Snake venom goes into you though, unless you're going to suck the venom out of the bite that I just got. In which case, here, we have fun, Vijay. I apologize for our inappropriate banter.
I love it.
We have a homelessness crisis in this country right now. We have more people homeless than ever before. We also have the highest number of homes and properties that are uninhabited. And unfortunately, the Airbnb properties kind of default fall into that category. I unfortunately don't feel like that is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And we kind of need technology and deflation to enter the housing market. And until that happens, we're not going to see the value, the store of value that's been stored in housing to get moved into Bitcoin. I'd love your thoughts if this sort of hypothesis is in line with what you would think or how you envision the store of value and the value that's been stored in real estate would get transferred to Bitcoin.
Yeah, there are a few issues in there. One is I agree that, and I do think technology is being applied to the housing market. You can now 3D print a house, and that's going to dramatically reduce the cost of producing a house. But there are other problems. One of them is regulation, which just in certain parts of the country make it so that you're not allowed to build a house. You're not allowed to build up. San Francisco is an example of this. There are so many regulations in the Bay Area that reduce density and make it more expensive to live in that part of the country. The other problem is, when you talk about the homeless problem, a big problem is bad governance. We have horrendously bad governance in some of America's great cities. You go to San Francisco, go to Detroit, go to Baltimore, go to DC, go to LA. Go to the downtown of these cities. They look like third world countries. It's really awful. I mean, I remember going to Calcutta when I was a kid, which is one of the poorest places on earth, and conditions are just awful. Go to San Francisco today, it looks like that. We have very obvious signs of decivilization in some of the most important American cities. And this to me is a sign of decay. It's a sign of bad governance. These cities are being run in the worst possible way. And it's not a problem that defies solution. There are solutions to this. And part of it is incentive structures. It's not just that there aren't enough houses, it's that there are huge drug problems in these cities. And the way they're handling them, and the way that they're handling, just keeping businesses safe is so bad. There are businesses that are just running away from the core of these cities because they don't feel like mom and pop businesses they're running in a downtown of, say, San Francisco, have people come in who are addled on drugs and stealing all of their stuff, and no one does anything about it. That's third world conditions, and that exists in US cities. And we just need governments to do the basic things that governments are supposed to do. If you're going to have a government, it should do very basic things, which is protect people's property rights. If someone's running a business and someone else steals from it, that other person should face some consequence for that. And it really does make me sad that you see the decay, the obvious signs. Some people may not know this because they don't see the decay because they've never been to another country, and they've never seen the opposite of a very well-run city that has good governance. I mean, go to a place like Singapore, for instance, or Monaco. These kind of small city states where things are run very, very efficiently, and people are safe. people don't feel safe anymore to raise their children in these cities, and that's just a huge tragedy. This is kind of separate to Bitcoin, but it's something that I'm very passionate about and upset about, to see America as a nation fall into decline when other nations are sort of coming up and realizing what good governance is and how they can run cities more efficiently and provide services for people. Yeah, we really need to address this problem, or people are not going to want to live in cities anymore. They're not going to want to live in places like San Francisco or Seattle or Detroit. So yeah, it's an issue that I really care about a lot.
I'd love like if you would entertain this, because we joke when we say this meme, but I think there is truth in it, the idea that Bitcoin fixes everything. And I'd love just a conversation around how Bitcoin could maybe shift our relationship with property and safety, and how could Bitcoin solve the issues that we see currently with property and safety.
I think one of the things that makes Bitcoin so powerful is that you get a property right without requiring this outside apparatus of coercion, which most people generally call the government or the state. You need a government to maintain property rights, because if someone steals from you, then how do you get that thing back? So you have this system of coercion that gets people their property back if that happens. But you don't need that with Bitcoin. One of the cases that I think would have been so great if Bitcoin was around, I think about the 1940s and World War II. And in particular, I think about the great Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, who fled. He was living in Switzerland and he fled across Europe just ahead of the clutches of the Nazis and came to the US. And he was living a pretty, comfortable upper middle class life when he was in Switzerland. He was a well-regarded professor of economics, and he had savings and he had a nice house. And he got to the US and he was penniless. He had nothing, and he had to take a much less prestigious job, smaller place, didn't have any of his resources. I think the value of Bitcoin is that in situations like that, people can have their savings and they can cross borders and keep their savings without anyone knowing. And in the modern world, it's actually applies in places like Venezuela, where people have escaped Venezuela and they've been able to keep their savings without the government even knowing that they have anything valuable. They cross the border with just the shirt on their back, but they've kept their savings. And that's a very, very powerful thing for people escaping oppression, is to be able to keep the fruits of their labor with them, without anyone else knowing. So I do think that has a very positive impact on the world, in places which don't have a great tradition of liberalism that allows people to keep their property and the fruits of their labor.
Vijay, I think I have one final question, but I wanted to just know, what are you paying attention to the most out of the development coming out of the Bitcoin space during this bear market? What is it that has you most excited? We've seen each bear market sort of give birth to new technology that the next bull market takes advantage of. Is there anything in particular that you're keeping a close eye on?
I think probably the growth of Lightning is, we've known about Lightning for a while. Just to see it develop and to see its adoption grow, I think that's a big one. Also, I'm interested in Taproot and what benefit that can provide in terms of privacy enhancements for Bitcoin, where you can have multiple keys own a Bitcoin address, and then you don't know who signed for it. I think that is a technology that can improve the privacy of Bitcoin in the future, but I think that's still a number of years away. People building products on top of the adoption of Taproot. So I'm interested in both of those. Probably Lightning is the bigger one because it's already so far advanced. I'm really excited to see the ability for people to transact tiny amounts and to allow for that idea that I mentioned early on, the airdrop idea. If the airdrop idea was ever created by someone, it would be using the Lightning Network. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see greater adoption of Lightning, and I think that there'll be business opportunities and ideas for people building on top of Lightning that we haven't even thought of. Just like in the early days of the internet, there's so many things that people like. You go back to 2000, most people would never have thought that you'd have Google Maps or Facebook or YouTube. None of these ideas would have people wouldn't have thought about those ideas. But they were all developed. I think the same thing is going to be true for Lightning. There's going to be a bunch of financial services and businesses that we hadn't anticipated that people build. And I'll give a fun idea that I never saw coming. But in the early days of Lightning, there was this website which was kind of a billboard, and you could draw pictures on it. It was like a community billboard, and it cost 1 sat per pixel. And in the beginning, it ended up being a bunch of dick pics, as it always does in the beginning.
I'm sorry.
Which was hilarious. But that's an idea that I never would have anticipated, which is really cool, right? That I think there are going to be things like that but there are also businesses as well that become possible when you can transmit micro amounts of value. What can you do with that? And I'm really excited to see how that develops in the next few years.
Yeah, on that note, the stuff that Impervious is doing is really exciting to me and interesting. They're about to launch their browser, which is, purports to be like a full replacement for the Google suite of apps, which is extremely ambitious, but they've had some really exciting hackathons, negotiating VPN credentials over Lightning, and then, that initial handshake, and then setting the channel up separately. So I agree. There's a lot of third layer apps that feels like they're just about to explode.
I didn't even know about that. That is super cool.
Yeah. You should check them out. They're doing some really awesome stuff. And then there's another one that's really exciting to me is DLC-based trading platforms that are, there's an Umbrel app now, which is, one of the more popular Node implementations for called Itchy Sats that lets you, it's a fully decentralized trading system for Bitcoin. It's pretty cool. So,
nice.
It's good stuff. What else? Where else should we go? I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. What's the most recent?
I want to ask this just while we bring up Lightning for a sec. How long do you think until Lightning capacity surpasses Visa or MasterCard?
Oh, that's a tough question. I do think that's a longer term thing. I think that's something that's going to be 5 to 10 years at least. Because I think Lightning will really take off when Bitcoin has become an established store of value. I think one of the big impediments of using Lightning kind of as a transactional layer and a medium of exchanges, people still don't really want to get rid of their Bitcoin. They don't really want to spend it. I think I will feel much more comfortable spending Bitcoin when that opportunity cost has shrunk a lot and Bitcoin is at, say, $500,000 or $1 million. And then it gets closer to plateauing, and it's not going up, say, 100x every 4 years. Once that has stopped happening, I think people will really want to use it as a medium of exchange much more.
I've just been told that the Impervious browser is out. Someone in our company has it on their computer. So,
whoa, I'll check it out.
Yeah.
Still frozen?
Yeah, kind of in and out. You're sort of like, you look like a robot.
No.
Do the robot dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Vijay, I want to give you the opportunity because my internet is just saying that I have none left. I'm going to turn the mic over to you for some final bullish thoughts.
Inspire the people.
I think this is the best time to be interested in Bitcoin. I always say this. When you're in a bear market, if you're able to get interested, to learn more about Bitcoin, to start building, to start investing, you are going to see the most success. I've seen this over and over again over the last decade. Unfortunately, the people who get excited right at the top of a bull market are the ones who get burnt, and then they lose hope, and then they go away, and then they come back again later on. So if you're around right now, I think it's a great time to invest more, to stack sats, to start a business. Go out and do that, and to learn as much as you can. There's so much happening. There's like stuff that P and Q were saying about what's happening with Bitcoin, I didn't even know about. So I need to go and do my research and figure out what's happening in the Bitcoin space and how I could get involved, because I'd love to work at a company that's doing something exciting in the Bitcoin space.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. And again, if you have not read Vijay's book, The Bullish Case for Bitcoin, check it out. It's one of my personal favorites. I also want to remind everybody that Bitcoin 2023 is just around the corner. If you've not already got yourself a ticket for Bitcoin 2023, use code BMLive to save 10% today. Of course, the print mag is also available. You can also save 10% on that. And the current edition, the censorship resistant issue, is going to become a collector's item very soon, because we are just about to launch the new Orange Party issue. Check it out, and we will see you all same time, same place tomorrow. Adios.